Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Facilitating Information Governance for Rapidly Scaling Data Sets. I'm Sarah Cook, Caringo's Director of Marketing. No organization wants to lose data or waste precious time searching for it when it's needed, and we all know the costly ramifications of failing to comply with the governmental regulations. So we've joined forces with our partner NetGovern to bring you today's webinar to talk about information governance and the need for tight integration with underlying storage infrastructure. I'd like to introduce our speakers to you. Jacques Sauvé, Director at NetGovern for Partner Enablement. Jacques, would you tell us a bit about yourself and your role at NetGovern?
Yes, ma'am. I've been in IT for over 25 years, been with NetGovern for almost 2 years now, but I've known these folks for a very, very long time, used to be one of their partners. And my current role now is, as you mentioned, Director of Partner Enablement. So my role is to go out and find some good partners that fit our vision and what we do, and then enable them, so get them all the sales training and technical training, so that we can be good partner for them and help them grow their revenue. Recently completed my IGP, Information Governance Professional, as we're really framing our solutions under the information governance umbrella, and so that's been really fun to do.
Great, and that was also part of your switch from NetMail to NetGovern, correct?
Correct, yeah, we used to be known as NetMail. The company's been around for 20 years. Obviously back then started focusing on anti-spam, antivirus, grew into the whole archiving thing, email archiving, but now we've grown beyond just email archiving, and as you will see, we are now also archiving file repositories no matter where they are. So the name NetMail just didn't work anymore. It wasn't didn't really resonate with where we're going. And so then, therefore, the branding changed to NetGovern, which resonates a little more with the information governance the direction that we're taking.
That's great. Yes, it is the 21st century now. Things have changed a lot in the past 20 years.
That's right.
Well, I'd also like to introduce our audience to Ben Canter, my colleague, and Caringo's Global Sales Director. So, Ben, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and share your thoughts about Caringo?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. So I've been in the data center space, focused in that realm really for the last 10 plus years, both on the hardware side and software side. And I've been with Caringo for the last 3 years. And really what I see where we fit and what our role here is to provide that highly available, always on, very secure, long-term storage platform for your unstructured data within today's enterprise. And I'm excited by this partnership, needless to say. We've been having known NetMail for a number of years, and now as NetGovern, I think we offered an amazing, amazing solution together around information governance, an end-to-end solution. So I can't wait to learn more from Jacques today and see, where the future brings the two companies together as we look to help more and more customers with these challenges. So with that, Jacques, do you want to take it over?
I do. Okay. So let's start. One of the things I want to talk about is the growth and the issues that we have with unstructured data, or that organizations have with unstructured data, and how do we deal with that amount of data. So here's, for example, one report that dates from about 1.5 years ago that shows how there's this explosion of data in cloud. And we're talking about unstructured data here. We're talking about all those, millions of files that users generate, Word, Excel, PDF, and, other file formats. We're not talking about databases here, database applications that would be known as structured data, but we really are talking about unstructured, the amount of growth in unstructured data. So it's not just a question of there's more and more of it. It's also a question of there's more and more locations. Studies show that organizations are using multiple cloud vendors to store stuff. So OneDrive, Box, Ignite, there's so many of them out there. And sometimes users through Shadow IT are storing stuff, a bit everywhere, which, as you can imagine, from a security and compliance point of view is a nightmare. What I do want to point out, though, excuse me, this study shows the explosion in cloud data, But what's interesting is organizations are telling us that, you know, those good old Windows shares that are on premises, they're also growing. And what I found funny was a couple of years ago, Gartner came out with a report that said, you know, all those on-premises Windows shares that everybody has and all those files that are there, they're going to disappear and they're going to become obsolete as people migrate to the cloud. And then about 2-3 years later, they came back and they said, oh, geez, we were wrong. These file systems are actually growing. And it's been my personal experience in the past couple of years as well, speaking with customers, that yeah, despite the fact that they're setting up, you know, SharePoint files, whether on premise or online, SharePoint sites, their good old Windows file systems are growing. There's more and more data in there. And I think one of the biggest problems is that nobody's cleaning up, right? And that's one of the big problems. So here's some interesting stuff, some interesting statistics when we talk about information governance. It is pretty much a given that anywhere from 40 to 70% of the data in an organization is what we call rot. So it's redundant, it's outdated, or it's trivial. Redundant, of course, we're talking about multiple copies of the same files, which in a lot of cases could be an issue, right, from an information governance point of view. It's outdated. Nobody likes to get rid of their old files. Oh, we might need that. Oh, we might look at that later. But it's unbelievable when you run some of the file analysis tools, how you find stuff that's mind-blowingly old and outdated and nobody's touched it in years. Yet we have it on expensive, fast storage. We back it up. You know, we take care of it like it was current, sensitive information, and it's not. And then the trivial part of it is, well, you know, users who store MP3s or movies or pictures of their vacations, whatever, and it's trivial. It has nothing to do with the business. It's not relevant, but because it's on the network storage, it is subject to discovery and all sorts of stuff. And again, we back it up. We take care of it like it was sensitive business information, and it's not. The biggest problem I've seen over the past couple of years, again, speaking with customers, is they just don't have a handle on all that data that's out there, on all that unstructured data. So that means that really about 1/3 of the information in any given organization could be classified as sensitive and having any kind of business value, just 1/3 of the data. You know, that's amazing. The other interesting statistic that comes out is from surveys and polls show that about 80% of organizations actually have some kind of budget approved to do something about this, let's call it dark data, all that unstructured data that's all over the place. So they have budget to do something about it. The biggest problem is they're just not quite sure how to go about it. So what are the pain points that customers are dealing with, organizations are dealing with? Well, you know, first of all is, where's my sensitive information? If only 1/3 of it has any kind of business value and is sensitive, well, where's that data? And who owns it? You know, and then how do we protect the organization from that data, you know, leaking out or being breached or being misused? Studying a lot of the information governance literature recently, I came across some incredible statistics. So I'd like to share with you. One of them is that it's estimated that 90% of the data worldwide was created in the last 2 years. Right, so think about how long we've all been working with computers and networks, but only in the last 2 years, humans have produced 90% of the data that's out there. That's incredible. And then the other one that to me is mind-blowing is information governance experts. They estimate that every 2 days, we generate, as a species, as humans, we generate more data than was ever produced from the dawn of civilization to 2003. You know, let that sink in. Think about the great libraries of Alexandria and all the great libraries in the universities across the world and how much literature and material we've produced as humans. But every 2 days, we produce more data than mankind has ever produced up until 2003. That's just mind-blowing. And so you can imagine the issues that creates from a compliance and e-discovery point of view is how do we find that needle in the haystack when we need it? So quickly, the goal here is not to turn everybody into information governance experts, but I thought it was important to share what the information governance reference model. And really the point here is information governance is not just an IT issue. Actually, it isn't an IT issue. Yes, IT has traditionally been the ones dealing with, the networks and network shares and security, but, people store data on it, but their job has always been to just run the infrastructure, provide some security, and make sure the data is protected and all that. But in terms of the management of that information, organizations are realizing now that it's a collaborative effort. First of all, we have the business. The business creates data. I mean, that's its role, right? Users create data, they create files, and then from there, we have to make sure that that data is well managed. So beyond IT providing the infrastructure and making sure it runs, well, we have the RIM folks, right? Records and Information Management, that have to make sure that we're keeping the data for the right amount of time. So they're concerned with records retention schedules. How long do we have to keep this data? When can we get rid of, at what point can we get rid of, these records or those records? From a legal perspective, of course, they're tasked with making sure that they follow all of the regulations around their industry, whether that's healthcare or finance. They have to make sure that all of that is what are the legal requirements in terms of retaining data. And then obviously they have to deal with litigation. So if you're in an industry where there's that is subject to litigation, then they have to be able to deal with those litigation requests. From a privacy and security point of view, of course, we're talking about compliance and audit. This is concerned with where is the sensitive data. For example, in any industry that deals with consumer credit cards and payments, obviously they're subject to PCI regulations, which means you're not allowed to store credit card numbers, on your network or in files or in emails. So how do I know that if I'm going to get audited, somebody's not going to find, Ben is storing a spreadsheet in his OneDrive with credit card numbers in there. How do I get that visibility? And then I'm not subject to litigation because, Ben is storing users' credit cards or customers' credit cards information in a spreadsheet. So it really is, information governance really involves the entire business. It doesn't just rest on IT's shoulders. Everybody's got to get involved, and everybody has to make sure that we're following the rules and that we're managing our data properly. So every year, the Information Governance Initiative polls IG experts to find out what are the most important facets of IG. And as we were digging into this, we said, hey, what's kind of cool is that as an organization in our solutions and what we bring, in tandem with Caringo, is we are addressing 9 of the top 10 facets of IG. So that's pretty cool in terms of mitigating risk and ensuring compliance and providing strong e-discovery and privacy and obviously meeting legal requirements and lifecycle management of your data. So it's pretty cool that we're able to help with a lot of those facets and get organizations going. Remember I said about 80% of organizations have some kind of budget to do something. They're not sure what. Well, if they're looking at information governance, this is a good place to start. So what is it that we do? What is it that NetGovern does? Well, we write software and we bring solutions to market, which really gives you a predictable and proactive approach to your information governance strategy. So everything we do is around information governance, mitigating risk, reducing costs. So from a legal perspective, obviously providing e-discovery, because we provide visibility into all of your unstructured data, no matter where it is. So legal departments can easily meet e-discovery requests in a timely manner, in a cost-efficient manner, across on-premises or cloud storage. From a compliance perspective, well, obviously we're indexing all of that data to be able to provide e-discovery. So if we're indexing all that data and we know what's out there, it becomes very easy for compliance departments to then look for PII information or PHI or PCI and make sure that there's no non-compliant information or data where it shouldn't be. Again, Ben's spreadsheet with credit card numbers. I'm picking on you, Ben. I'm sorry. You're easy target today. So
No, I just want to promise everyone and anyone that's listening, I do not have any sheets with credit card numbers on it. I promise.
Just so you know,
good.
Ben is always an easy target, but I watch
Yeah?
him back.
All right, good. So I always like to pick on someone. Ben, you're it today. So, making sure that, we find that information almost in real time, because we're constantly indexing the data. And important to note here, and we'll go over this again, we're not collecting the data at this point. We're just going out there, crawling the information and creating an index of all the data that's out there. We obviously also do content archiving. So yes, we can archive emails. I mean, that's kind of how we started, right? We were an archiving and anti-spam email management company, hence the name NetMail back then. But we still do email archiving because in a lot of organizations, they want to keep their exchange systems trim. They want to save on licenses. So if you've got a bunch of users that have left the organization, but their mailboxes are still in the exchange system and you're still paying, annual license fees, why? Put that in an archive. It's less expensive, and you have that there in the archive now, and then you can also start putting in policies to manage that information. Retraction. How cool would it be if a phishing email scam came in, somebody reports it to IT and says, oh, this doesn't look right, and sure enough, IT looks at it and goes, no, that's a phishing email, the IRS phishing email or Revenue Canada up here. And what if IT could just do a quick search, find that email in all the mailboxes, all the live mailboxes out there, and find multiple instances of it, and just be able to quickly, one button, retract. Like, get it out of those mailboxes before people start clicking on those links and following those links and, start providing sensitive credentials and stuff like that. Now, important to note, yes, we can retract information from mailboxes, but if somebody looks at it and reviews it and goes, oh, no, it's not a phishing email, it's actually a valid email, this is a vendor we deal with or whatever, well, we can actually re-inject then that message back into all the mailboxes. The users are taken out, we put it back, but on the back end in the NetGovern archive, everything is audited. So we know who retracted the message, which messages were retracted from which mailboxes, and if it was put back or not. And then once you have stuff in the archive, of course, we can enforce policies for life cycle management. So if your organization says, well, we're going to keep emails for 7 years, and after that, anything older than 7 years, we delete. There's no need to keep that as part of our IG strategy. However, maybe for executives, we're going to keep it for 10 years because, we need to be able to provide more information from the executive point of view. So very manageable in terms of which users and which user groups get which policies. Unstructured data governance. Again, being able to run tools that will analyze all of your files across your enterprise, across the country, across the world, look at all those Windows shares that you've got, and be able to report on that. How old is the data? When was the last time it was used? What type of data do we have out there? Do we have a ton of MP3 or AVIs that, part of that trivial files from the rot? Do we have a ton of redundant files? I live and work just outside of Calgary, Alberta. For those of you who don't know, Alberta is kind of the Texas of Canada. It's oil and gas. And it was explained to me that some of the contracts that they have for land lease, they have to keep for 25 years, and they have to have one single instance of the contract. They kind of non-compliant if they have multiple copies of the contract across the network. Well, how do you find that? How do you scour all of your file repositories to make sure that you only have that one version? You run the file analysis tool and it'll find all the duplicates wherever they are. Access governance, we can also tell who's got access to the data. We can do it from two perspectives. You can look at a set of data. So for example, you can go to a share where there's all the financial statements and financial data that finance works on, and the CFO and the CEOs and all the executives collaborate on that stuff. And you can say, well, look at this financial data here. Who has access to it? And you can easily report and see who's got access to all of that data and how they inherited those rights. Right? Was it from a group assignment or from an OU that was given rights to a certain area of the file system? And you can also look at it from the user perspective. So I can go into my reports and I say, all right, I want to see where Ben has access to. And, and I'll see all the spaces he's got access to in the file systems across the network and how he inherited those rights. And then I can easily spot anomalies, like why does Ben have access to the HR staff? Right? So we can then remediate that if we know what he's got. And then obviously our traditional anti-spam, antivirus engines, appliances that also have plugins for data leak protection and encryption, which we'll talk a little bit about in a little bit. So basically that's what we do. We bring out these solutions. We bring these solutions to market to help address information governance needs. And I'll repeat, we saw the information governance reference model a little while ago. It's not about IT. It's not necessarily an IT problem. It could be an IT need, a pure IT play, where an IT department says, our Exchange system is bloated. We've got a ton of stuff in there from users that are gone. I want to shrink that back down, make it healthier, make it, give it better performance, less backup time. Well, then yes, fine. Put in NetGovern archive, get those mailboxes archived, and reduce the size of your Exchange system. But mostly, the people we want to talk to and where we address the most is legal, right? Getting them ready for e-discovery or internal audits and litigation readiness and saving costs there. From a security and compliance point of view, obviously to be able to discover non-compliant data, but also to remediate it and be able to do something about it, take it out of there. From an HR perspective, being able to protect PII from all the employees and improve productivity in the sense that employees can then, or departments can then easily search for data, and then everybody's reassured that their data is protected. And from an operations and finance point of view, obviously we're talking about optimizing the organization's information, hence saving costs possibly on storage and backups and all that management of information, but also greatly reducing costs if ever there is litigation and e-discovery needs to be done against all that data. So, we like to give you a picture of our solutions. We kind of separate it into two, data at rest and data in transit. So the data at rest, we're talking obviously about the e-discovery and the retraction and audit components. The arrows show here that we have connectors to file systems. So these could be on-premises file systems, SharePoint, whether on-premises or online, OneDrive. We have connectors for Ignite. We have connectors for Citrix ShareFile, Box.com, and the architecture of our software allows us to easily create additional connectors for other file systems as well. As customers bring stuff to the table and say, well, look, we'd like to have a connector for this, the architecture provides fairly easy ways for us to do that. And email, where we can index live email, but also send emails to archive, as mentioned, to either reduce the size of your Exchange system, or sometimes in terms of when there's litigation and there's legal hold. So for example, I want to put Ben's mailbox on legal hold. I want to make sure that we preserve all of that in the archive and then put it on sensible storage, which, as you'll see, is where Caringo comes in. Then we have our data in transit products, which, as I mentioned, are NetGovern Secure, which is the anti-spam, antivirus solution, multi-layer engine. So we catch a lot of stuff. And in that, you can plug in DLP, data leak protection, and content filtering. So, for example, Ben cannot take his spreadsheet full of credit card numbers and email it out to somebody external, because we'll catch that and we'll say, hey, this spreadsheet here has a bunch of credit card numbers. We're not supposed to be sending that. So either we'll prevent it from being sent out, or we can put in a workflow that says, well, Ben is trying to send this spreadsheet here. I'm going to let his supervisor know or his manager know that he's trying to do this, and we'll see if it's okay. And the manager gets an email, and he can decide if, yes, this is a valid, yes, it is valid that we are sending this email, let it go, or no, prevent it from going out. Now, encrypt comes in where, sometimes for business reasons, we do need to send sensitive information out. So maybe there is a valid business reason that Ben's going to send his email out full of credit card numbers, but do we just want to send it out via normal email that can be caught along the way? So encrypt will automatically encrypt. It could be based on a DLP policy. Oh, credit card numbers in a spreadsheet, encrypt this. And we can send it out to, external recipients and not have to worry about the burdens of encryption, of exchanging, private and public keys with the recipient and having to do all that. That's very cumbersome. Nobody gets it. We will encrypt the email, send a notification to the recipient that they received an encrypted email, and then they can just log into this web page, create a password, and get the encrypted email. And then from that point on, they can exchange encrypted emails with the folks who sent the email originally. So very simple way to encrypt emails and do all sorts of content filtering and stuff like that. as I talk to customers, and information governance, especially in North America, is a fairly new discipline. And, you know, any business is in the business of making money for their shareholders. And so implementing information governance policies and thinking about data and spending money on protecting data, it's not necessarily revenue generating. So there's been this hesitancy to spend money on that. But studies have shown that if you don't, it costs almost 3 times more when you're not ready. And it's you know, the cost, you're looking at the cost of business disruption, right? Everybody's working on getting this information for the litigation request. So we're not being productive. We're losing revenue because we're in a bad light and we're wasting time, you know, finding all this information. And then really the worst aspect of it is all the fines and penalties that can be imposed by the courts if you're not ready. Interestingly, as I've spoken to organizations in the past couple of years, and I say, you know, be ready for e-discovery. Know what you have out there. Be able to quickly find it, so that if there is a litigation request, you can meet that demand quickly and efficiently, and not have to blow a ton of money on it. Now, oftentimes the reaction I've had is, oh, well, you know, we've been in business for 10 years and we've never had litigation. Okay, good for you. I've never had a fire in my house, but every year I still buy insurance in case I do, right? And I always, the other thing I'll point out is, yes, I live out in Alberta, horse country, and I love horseback riding, and they say there are 2 types of riders: those that have fallen off a horse and those that will fall off a horse. Luckily, I'm still part of the first group. I know I will get thrown off a horse one day, but so, you know, you may have never had to deal with litigation. Great, good for you. But if you do have to deal with it at some point in time and you're not ready, just know that it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more if you're not ready than if you were. So yeah, to some extent it's a bit of insurance, but it's also the whole question of managing your information properly and being ready to meet those requests and being compliant in your industry. So as we talk about e-discovery, you know, in the e-discovery world, there is this thing called the EDRM, the Electronic Discovery Reference Model. So let's say, for example, there is a litigation request, and you're asked to provide, you know, emails and documents that might be relevant to the case. So the EDRM, this e-discovery reference model, kind of goes something like this. First, you know, hopefully you have some kind of information governance strategy in place. And then when the litigation request comes in, you then have to identify which data, which mailboxes, which file repositories may contain information that might be relevant to the case. And then the next step is to, you know, to preserve and to collect all that data. So basically the EDRM says, well, collect all that data, and then we're going to submit it for processing, review, and analysis. In other words, we're going to sift through everything, through that glut of data, and try to find what's relevant. Now, remember when I said earlier that 40 to 70% of an organization's data is rot, redundant, outdated, and trivial. So if you're going to collect a bunch of stuff, well, there's a damn good chance that a lot of that's going to be rot as well, but you're still going to have to process it, review it, analyze it, and then when you're ready, you know, send it out for production, export, and then finally get it ready for presentation in the court case. Now, you'll notice that at the bottom there are arrows as well. That means the whole thing is iterative. So you can go out and identify a bunch of stuff, preserve and collect it, go through it, and then, you know, the legal folks or the auditors will be going, well, you know, Ben here, yeah, there's a lot of emails from Ben, but he's also talking a lot about Sarah. So maybe we got to go back and collect Sarah's stuff as well. So now we're going to start collecting other information. So we kind of go in this loop of going back to preserve and collect more information and add that to the review process, you know, and try to really filter out what is needed. And that's a very costly process. Actually, statistics show that about 73% of the cost of litigation is the e-discovery stuff. So again, in the e-discovery world, there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of. Organizations have a duty to preserve. And the courts agree that there's no excuses for an organization to fail to preserve and protect electronically stored information when they believe it could be subject to litigation. And organizations that fail to comply to these rules can end up with heavy court-imposed sanctions, fines, attorney fees, or even outright loss of the case. So making sure that an organization properly preserves the data that could be subject to e-discovery and litigation is, again, part of an IG or information governance strategy. One note here, it's been shown, there's been precedent to show that the courts do not expect perfection. If, as an organization, you're under litigation and you can show the courts that you're making an effort at IG, that you're making an effort to preserve information and protect it, they'll be a lot more lenient. But if you have no strategy in place to preserve data and you're deleting data and all that stuff, they're not going to be very lenient and it could be very costly. Right? The next term we want to go over is just legal hold. Right? So when there is litigation or litigation is contemplated, then it's the duty of the organization to put that information on what we call legal hold. In other words, stop all normal life cycle management processes or records disposition processes and keep that data so that it can be discoverable and be part of the litigation. Now, the whole idea behind legal hold is to avoid something that's called spoliation. And that's really, spoliation is defined as where a party has intentionally destroyed evidence relevant to ongoing or contemplated litigation in circumstances where a reasonable inference can be drawn that the evidence was destroyed to affect the litigation. In other words, you're deleting data to give yourself a better chance at winning the case. Now, there are 4 factors that need to be present for them to prove spoliation. 1, the evidence must be relevant. The missing evidence must have been relevant to the litigation. 2, the missing evidence must have been destroyed intentionally. 3, at the time of destruction, litigation must have been ongoing or contemplated. And 4, it must be reasonably easy to infer that the evidence was destroyed in order to affect the outcome of the litigation. So it's a duty to preserve, putting that on legal hold to avoid spoliation and excessive costs, court costs and fines and fees and all sorts of stuff. So how do we help make the e-discovery process easier? Well, all right, so we talked about the EDRM model, right? This loop of collect everything, sift through it. Oh, maybe we go back and collect more stuff, sift through it some more, and it becomes a very costly process. Well, we kind of think it makes sense to review, search, and process, review, and analyze first. And because we go out and index all of that data, we can then easily query that index and say, well, find me all emails that Ben sent that had credit card numbers in it or, whatever. But we process the data and we review it in source. So we've indexed the live mailboxes, we've indexed the documents, and we have to, at that point, once we've identified the data, then we can put it on legal hold, preserve it, and when we've reviewed it, tagged it as relevant, and really sifted through all our data in the enterprise, then we can collect it and export it for production. We think that makes a lot more sense than collecting everything, including, the 40 to 70% rot that's out there, and sifting through it all to be then able to export. So we think it makes more sense to be able to review and analyze and search through your data and then tag what's relevant. It's a very collaborative effort. So you have a case manager, you have auditors and reviewers, so very collaborative way to search through your data and tag what's relevant to be able to then finally export it. So in all of this, where does Caringo fit in? Well, I talked about our product, our e-discovery. We go out and index everything, but we also archive. We also put stuff on legal hold. The way we store data is not in a database. We create an index of all the data, but once we decide to pull it out of its source or copy it out of its source into an archive or put it on legal hold, we store everything in open XML format. And what do you know? Caringo Swarm is a great solution for storing that kind of information. And we've been working with them for several years, and we have a lot of customers that use their Caringo Swarm backend as a storage mechanism, and it's been awesome. And they can do stuff that nobody else can do. This is where I hand it to you, Ben.
Thanks, Jacques. So it's funny, we just a few weeks ago when we were sitting down together and we went over some of this presentation, where you guys are going with it. It made me do some reflection on where, in general, storage and management of your data center is going. And one of the things that I think we're at a tipping point of, and we're seeing a lot of this too, is instead of being application aware in the storage space or application aware in general, it's now switching because there's so much of it content aware decision making. And I think your product helps customers with that really focused decision-making process based on the content and, in some cases, the value of that data and where it should live, where it should sit, how it should breathe within someone's live environment. And I think we're at a tipping point, in my opinion. So, and as you said, we've been working together a number of years as companies. We are the perfect repository for that long-term archive tier to hold on to the data under control, highly secure and protected, but yet not losing the access that you may need to it. And what we do is we're helping modernize the environment. Again, I think your technology as well, Jacques, is really helping modernize people's approach to how they want to manage their data. And what we do that's a little different and why we're such a good fit together is we are a true software-defined storage solution. And what I mean by that, we're not tied into the underlying hardware. And why this is important is because if you're using a tool to hold on to data for a life cycle requirement, maybe by regulations, 10 years, 30 years, over the course of that time, your underlying hardware is going to change multiple times. Being able to keep the data secure, controlled, and have multiple generations of hardware all working together to hold this growing storage pool is critical to your business success. It's really a future-proof requirement, and that's something that we've been doing for a number of years. The other thing I think that would point out on why we're such a great fit for that archive tier of data or that critical data that needs to be held under certain policies is the way that we're universal. Some of the requirements today would be through protocols such as NFS, but as we're modernizing, you see more and more people leveraging S3 protocols and web-based protocols, your HTTP. And the fact that we can operate and share a single namespace between all those protocols really allows you to support over time. Because again, looking at what your environment will look like in 10 years, 15 years, maybe 30 years, for the life of that data, you're going to have some changes. And that universal namespace is really what's going to allow you to modernize on demand with your environment. And then the last thing we do to help keep that proof is, or keep that data protected, is we encapsulate the metadata with the data itself. So there's no separate metadata database to manage for all this critical data. And at scale, that becomes operationally more expensive than managing the storage itself. So needless to say, Caringo fits in very well with these archive or Tier 2 type storage destinations. And if you look at our underlying architecture, and the slide jumped ahead quicker than I did, sorry about that. But one thing that unique, what we do is we're very efficient. For this data, you'd want to try to keep your costs down since it's not, in a lot of cases, revenue-generating data. It's your insurance, it's your safety net, it's your protection. Is we boot from bare metal. So we run right on RAM, and we use about 95% of the system's storage space for actual data storage. The other thing we do is we deploy in a manner that is truly highly redundant, highly available, no single points of failure, so you don't have to worry about not having access to your data. 100% of our nodes or storage components within the cluster can do 100% of the operations. No single points of failure, as I mentioned. And the other thing we also do is some of that data is going to live, but it may have even that content may have different value within it. You can protect it different ways to ensure different nines of durability. So using the same infrastructure, you can have replication, or you could have EC scheme or erasure coding scheme that protects up to 13 nines of availability. Because we're decoupled software from the hardware, we're able to utilize the underlying hardware in many different ways. And of course, we are protecting the content in a manner that is FIPS compliant, SEC 17A-4 compliant. What that means is built into the storage system is your encryption at rest, your integrity seals, your legal hold, your worm. It's all built into the system natively. The benefit there is a lot of times you have these regulations that are dictating how you have to protect the data. So hand in hand, the storage system can do that with, hand in hand with NetGovern services to make sure you're meeting all your regulation criteria as well. So with that, I wanted to hand it back. I'm not sure if the slide looks a little messy here, but I want to hand it back to Jacques here to take us home.
What do you mean it's messy? It's not messy. No,
I only see an NG in the middle.
Yeah, NetGovern. So what we're saying here is that
I apologize. That looks exactly like the NG in Caringo.
No. No, NG, NetGovern. No, what we're showing here is that we'll go out and crawl and index the archive, index all the data, no matter where it is, whether it's on premises or cloud, and different clouds, different sort of file repositories, whether it's online again or on premises. We just generate this index of everything. Again, we don't move anything until the organization says, well, we want to retain some stuff for archiving, so we'll move it to the archive or copy it to the archive, or we'll put it in legal hold for litigation purposes, and then we also allow you to take all that data and export it into different formats for presentation for courts. And I'll just leave you with this quote that that came out. We just yesterday, our founder pointed me to this article on LinkedIn by this gentleman, implementing a data retention and disposition strategy as part of the ordinary course of business prior to the preservation duty kicking in is a great way to control the amount of data subject to discovery. This simultaneously enhances the ability to quickly develop an early understanding of what information is available and to begin to contain the likely scope and ultimate cost of the entire e-discovery process. So, but basically, what I've said earlier, again, having a handle on that unstructured data, being ready, right? Not just having a handle on it, which means having an information governance strategy in place or starting to think about the information governance in your organization and how you handle information, how you dispose of it. Because if you don't dispose of stuff that's no longer relevant, it becomes subject to e-discovery, right? So it's as important to dispose of old information as it is to keep it. And then having the technology stack there to help you, meet those requirements. An interesting anecdote, last fall I was in one of the oil and gas companies here in Calgary, and I talked about our solutions, how we go out and index all that stuff. They were looking for, actually, the folks were looking for an email archiving solution. So we went to talk about how we do things, but I also told them that we do, the document archiving or indexing and provide the e-discovery functionality. So the IT director, we had a 1.5 hour meeting, just whiteboarding and showing how the solution works. And after the meeting, over the next couple of days, he was trying to build a business case. He went to see his legal team to show them, what we were offering, and if he can get sort of their backing or their feedback to help him build his business case. He ended up coming back to his email manager and saying, oh, I think if we don't do this, we're going to get fired. So legal was all over this. They were blown away. So this is in production now. They're able to easily do e-discovery, oil and gas, right? So there's not that there's litigation, but there's information requests, and they have to be, making sure that there's not any non-compliant data everywhere. So it was kind of cool when we heard that, the IT director says, well, we're going to get fired if we don't do this. So very powerful technology stack, and with Caringo on the back end, storing all that information. We have a federal, department in the U.S. that has 143 terabytes of email archive that they've archived over the years with NetGovern and with Caringo Swarm in the back, and they will swear that there is no way they could store all of that information on any kind of normal file system. So they're just blown away by what Caringo can do on the back end and how it handles the data and the redundancy of the data and the integrity of the data as well. So very powerful solutions to make sure that you're preserving and well equipped to handle all those e-discovery needs.
Well, we never get tired of hearing that.
All right.
We love to be able to help our customers, and we love to work with partners like NetGovern.
Good. Yeah, been a blast working with you guys too, and hopefully even more in the future. But it's what we keep hearing from the customers that implement the solution, with Caringo on the back end is, one, how easy it is, and two, how just friggin' powerful it is, and how they feel their data is safe and secure with that. Just they've never seen anything like it before.
Well, y'all are 20 years old, but we turned 13 this year, so we've got some tremendous installations that have been up and running for a very long time now. And it is amazing just how much people can use our storage to scale.
Absolutely.
So with that, I want to invite our audience to follow NetGovern and Caringo on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also reach out to the team in NetGovern by emailing them at info@netmail.com, and you can always email us at info@caringo.com. I won't promise that Ben or I will personally get back to you, but somebody will. And with that, I want to thank you, Jacques, for joining me and Ben today, and a big thank you to our audience. So this concludes today's webinar, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And Ben, watch out for those emails. Watch out for those spreadsheets.
I promise.
Yeah,
I promise.
half my job is keeping Ben in line.
Okay.
Listen, the only person I sent it to is, I got an email from a Nigerian prince. I think it's a good investment. I think the money will come back to us good. So that's the only one I would share it with.
Okay, good deal. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.